I love a secret ingredient. Just like keeps you all on your toes because you're like, oh, I have to keep watching. What's the secret ingredient? Hi, I'm Melissa Clark. I am a food reporter for the New York Times, and I am here in the beautiful NYT Cooking kitchen studio. It's a new episode of my show, Shortcut versus Showstopper. The point of the show is that you can make incredibly delicious baked goods in a quick way, a shortcut version, or you can blow it out. You can make the most delicious version, the Showstopper. The first one, super easy shortcut version using purchased pizza dough, but we zhuzh it up and make it special. The second one, totally traditional, classic with a secret ingredient that makes them the best rolls you've ever had with this delightful buttery coating. If you're the kind of family that always has fluffy rolls at the table of Thanksgiving, this is going to become your new go-to recipe. The shortcut part of these shortcut rolls is using prepared pizza dough. You will need 2 pounds of it, so 2 balls of prepared pizza dough. Try to defrost it overnight in the fridge or at least a couple hours at room temperature. And you want it to get nice and puffy before you even start on the shaping. We're gonna give this pizza dough lots of flavor by using a seasoned butter. And we're gonna add so much seasoned butter that this is going to taste like, well, mostly buttery, which is what you want in a roll, right? Buttery. To accentuate the butter flavor, I'm gonna also add salt and sugar. I'm using, regular sea salt here. And I'm gonna use Demerara sugar. Demerara sugar is a granular brown sugar. It's that sugar in the raw that you see. So it's pretty easy to get. I'm using it instead of granulated sugar because I want the slight molasses character and I want the texture because I'm gonna put it in the rolls, but I'm also gonna use it to butter the pan. And this is what happens, and I love this so much. It caramelizes on the sides, on the edges of the pan and gets super crunchy, even crunchier than it is now. So you have the contrast between this crunchy sugar and the fluffy rolls, and then freshly ground pepper. So I'm gonna use a little bit of this butter to butter the pan, and then I'm gonna use the rest of it when I make the rolls. You wanna do the bottom and then up the sides of the pan as well. So when I was thinking about how to make a shortcut Parker House type roll, I was thinking, well, what are people gonna be comfortable with that's not making your own yeast dough, which I know for some people is a barrier to entry. And you're not gonna do yeast, I get it, you don't have to do yeast. I came to pizza dough because it's the easiest yeast dough you can buy. Most supermarkets have it. It doesn't have a lot of character on its own so that you can add all the flavor you want with the butter. So it had the most possibility. I'm gonna shape one piece at a time. Keep the flour to a minimum. This dough is not very sticky. Roll or stretch to an 8 by 12 inch rectangle. You can use a ruler or you can just eyeball it. We know this is 9 by 13, right? So 8 by 12 is just a little bit smaller than this pan. And then that gives the rolls space to rise and to proof. Get nice and puffy. There, puffy is a good synonym for fluffy, and it rhymes. Needs to be a little bit wider. That's gonna be perfect. So we're gonna use all of this butter. Some of it's gonna go on this set of rolls. I'm gonna do it again with the other ball of dough. And then at the very end, after all the rolls are shaped, more butter on top. So we're just buttering it up. At every stage where one can add butter, I am going to add butter. I feel like that's a good philosophy of life. Take your buttery moments, savor them. So I'm folding the dough in half, but I just want to reform it, just pat it into a nice rectangle, and then we're going to cut it into 9 pieces. So I'm cutting this with a bench scraper. Do you have one of these? These are the coolest things. If you don't have a bench scraper, I feel like they're not that expensive, and it's just easier to cut with a bench scraper. Look at this, it's just you make one long cut. You don't have to worry about ruining your knife blade on your counter. However, if you do not have one of these, use a knife, it's fine. Just use a big, sharp, heavy knife. Don't try to do this with a little paring knife. It's gonna be harder on you. I mean, you can, it's just harder. Then you just wanna put them into your pan, and we're gonna do the same thing with the other dough. I'm gonna butter the tops of these. The butter is really essential at this point. If you don't butter these, they won't get that rich golden brown color. So do not skimp on the butter, not to mention it tastes good. We use 1 stick of butter per week in our house. We are a butter-loving family. Okay, so there's a little bit of butter left, so save this. I'm gonna cover this. You can just cover it with a dish towel. They're not gonna dry out. You wanna set them aside in a warm spot for 1 hour to 2 hours, and then we're gonna bake them. And in the meantime, I'm going to show you how to make the Showstopper rolls. When I was developing the Showstopper rolls, I tried so many versions of Parker House rolls. I did classic ones, I used potato starch, I used different starches, I tried different proofing times. The best version had this one secret ingredient in it: potato flakes. These are just dehydrated potatoes. And if you think about potato rolls, right? Potato rolls are really fluffy, so you can get that same texture, but instead of using a potato that you boil and then mash, using potato flakes is better because they're dehydrated, so you don't have that extra moisture, so all you have is the starch and that lovely potato flavor. It works so well. Just make sure to buy plain potato flakes. Don't buy the kind with sour cream and onion. Don't buy the flavored ones. The plain ones are exactly what you want here. So you want to start off with all your dry ingredients: flour, the potato flakes, salt, granulated sugar. I'm gonna use 3 tablespoons. And then this is yeast. You can use instant yeast. You can just use regular active dry yeast. I'm just gonna mix everything up. Actually, you know what? A whisk is probably better for this. This is just gonna distribute the yeast, get it nice and mixed before I add the liquid. So that can hang out. Over here I have my liquids, and I'm gonna start out with butter. I'm gonna melt the butter, and once the butter melts, I'm going to add my cold milk because I want the butter and the milk to be warmish but not hot, so it doesn't cook the egg, but still warm enough so that when I add it to the dry ingredients, which have the yeast in it, the yeast is going to start feeding off of all of the sugars in the milk, the sugar in the dry mix, and that's going to just start the fermentation, and it's going to make the dough rise. If you're a little bit intimidated and you've never worked with yeast before, I think it's easier to add the yeast to the dry ingredients. Okay, so I'm just going to test it with my pinky. Yeah. So, I mean, if you can do that, if you can stick your pinky in, it's not going to cook the egg, so you're good. Mix it up a little bit, add it to my milk and butter mixture. This is going to get added to my dry ingredients. Then just mix everything together. You don't need a mixer for this recipe. You can absolutely do it by hand. Stir it together with a wooden spoon, and then once it comes together, you can start kneading. But we're going to do it all in the machine because we have it. So I'm just helping the flour down the sides of the bowl so that it gets mixed into the wet mass in the middle. Okay, so you can see everything is coming together in a mass. And now I'm gonna raise the mixer speed just a little bit, and this is gonna be the kneading part of it. If you were doing this in a bowl with your hands, you would just be kneading it. This dough feels so lovely, and it's very meditative. You wanna do this in a mixer for between like 3 and 5 minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. It's almost ready. See how it pulls, which is, you want the elasticity. The elasticity shows you that the gluten has developed, right? This pull is what you're looking for, but it's not pully enough. And also, you might think, okay, this dough is elastic because it's pulling, but you see when I pull, it breaks. It's not quite developed enough. So I'm gonna let it go for another couple of minutes. I want it smoother and I want it even more elastic, which is what you want. That's when you know the gluten is ready. Okay, we're gonna check it again. So now it's been about 4 minutes. First of all, I can feel that it's smooth. I can feel that when I put my hand on the dough, it feels tacky, it feels moist, a little bit sticky, but it doesn't stick to my hands. See, my hands are clean, so that's a good indication. And then when I'm pulling it, see how it pulls a little bit better. If you're kneading by hand, I'm just gonna show you the technique, and you're just going to use the heels of your hands and a little bit of your body weight, because you wanna work that dough. So you're just leading into it, and that is how you knead by hand, and it is very satisfying. This dough is so smooth, you don't even need to flour your counter. It's not sticking. So I'm gonna form this into a ball, and now this bowl has a little bit of oil, or you could use butter, and I'm gonna just oil the top of the dough, and then I'm gonna turn it over so the oiled part is on top, and this is gonna keep the dough from drying out. You could use a towel or a plastic wrap, and we're gonna set it aside, and we want this to double in size. This is important. If you're the kind of person, and I have done this, who forgets, well, how big was it before? I forget, it's like growing, but I don't remember. Is it double? Because I can't remember the size. Take a picture of it, and then you can compare it later on. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna take a picture, and then we'll really know, has it doubled? We will have a point of reference. It's taken me 1 hour and 15 minutes when the room is really warm. It's taken up to 3 hours when the room is cold. But here's a little trick for you. Say that it reaches the perfect, it rises really quickly and you're not ready for it, and it's like, oh my God, it's doubled. At that point, you can stick it in the fridge. So you do have options. You don't have to be chained to your bread all day long. Your dough will be somewhat flexible for you. Where's the warmest spot in the house? Guess by the oven, right? So I have my butter right here. and it is very soft. You want it to have the texture of icing. Now I'm using Demerara sugar. These are not sweet rolls, this is not dessert, but it's just a little bit of sweetness and then the textural contrast along the edges. And then a little more salt. And you want to use freshly ground black pepper. It adds spice, but it also adds a savory note to kind of balance out the sweetness. And also another great thing about the black pepper, you know when all of your ingredients are well mixed because you can see the distribution of peppery specks. If you want to play around and you want to add other flavors, this butter is where you want to do it. I want all of you to go to town, make crazy butter combinations, and then put it in the comments so that we can all share. We're going to use a little bit of this butter for the pan. The rolls are going to rise, so you need to make sure the sides are well buttered. Okay, we've got our dough. You can see, I mean, check that out. That is absolutely doubled. It looks nice and puffy. I'm going to work with half of the dough at a time, so this can just hang out. And I'm going to roll it into an 8 by 12 inch rectangle. So this is the hard part for me because I'm a little bit math challenged, and I wanted to have just the right amount to fill this pan perfectly. So I needed to cut the rolls into the proper amount for the pan. I had to draw it on grid paper and like measure it out, but I have figured it out, and so now this works. You're going to have 18 perfect rolls, and they're going to look great. Okay, I've got the 12. Yep, perfect. So now I'm going to slather this with butter and fold it over and then cut out my rolls. So I want to use about a third of what's left here because I'm going to do it again. Another third for this, and then the last third gets slathered right on top. Just eyeball it. It doesn't matter. Like if you use a little less here, a little less there, it all goes to the same place, so you're good. So this is like the perfect starter yeast recipe, I think. So if you're a little bit afraid of bread, start with rolls. They're more forgiving, especially buttery rolls. Okay, so fold this in half. Now it's time for the math. We can do it. So I want 9 perfect rolls out of this. And I think that that looks good. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit. That's pretty good. All right, let's do it again. And I'm going to put them into the pan, and I'm going to do it again with the other one, and we're going to brush everything with butter. Okay. Now that they are all in the pan, 3 nice rows, I'm going to brush the tops with butter. This is what's going to make them beautifully golden on top. Okay, I'm saving just a little bit of the butter for the end. At this point, the dough is so well greased, you could just use a dish towel to cover it up and let them proof. What you want is you want them to get puffy and kind of fill the whole pan. So you want to leave them for, I mean, anywhere from like an hour to 2 hours, depending on how warm your kitchen is. So I'm going to put these in the warm place. And we're back. We have everything proofed. And do we remember which one is a shortcut and which one is a showstopper? Showstopper. And this one is a shortcut. And they look a little different. The showstopper, it has egg in the dough, so you can actually see that in the color. It's got a yellow cast. And this one is a shortcut. It's paler because there's no egg. Before I put these in the oven, I'm going to sprinkle more Demerara sugar and a little bit of flaky sea salt. I really want the 2 different textures. And I'm going to do that to both pans. How do you know if your rolls have proofed enough? Can you see how puffy they are? Do you remember when I put them in the pan, there was a lot of space in between each one, and you can see that it's filled out the pan really nicely. But another way to tell is I'm poking it. It feels risen, it feels puffy. I don't know if you can see that, but I just poked it and it left an indentation in the roll, which you don't want to do on a lot of it. As a little test, if you press down, your fingerprint should stay. That means you know that it's proofed enough. If it springs right back up, you want to give it a little bit more time. You got to get the puffy before you get to the fluffy. I'm just not going to stop. I am baking these at 2 different temperatures, and the reason for that is these showstopper rolls with the egg and the milk in the actual dough can bake at a lower temperature because they'll pick up color pretty quickly because of the richness. The pizza dough takes a higher temperature to get a nice color on it. So this one I'm going to bake at 425, and this one needs to be baked at 450. All right, now which oven is set at which? Let's see. Always start checking your baked goods 2 to 5 minutes before instructions in the recipe. Like if a recipe said something is done in 30 minutes, you always start checking at 28 because you don't know if your oven runs a little bit hot. All right, we've got our showstoppers, we have our shortcuts, and I'm gonna brush everything with tons more of this beautiful, salty, peppery, sugary butter right on top. After I brush them with the butter, I'm going to let the showstoppers cool down uncovered, but I'm gonna cover the shortcut rolls because the pizza dough, I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of crusty, and I want them to be soft. So by covering them with foil and letting them steam a little bit, it's gonna soften them up nicely. They smell so good. They smell like freshly baked bread, which is the best thing. Here's a trick. Use a dish towel. I'm just gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes and then we're gonna come back and rip into them. Oh yeah. Should we check them out? Look at that. Look at that. Soft, buttery. Can you see the steam rising off the top? And now our showstopper. I'm getting right in here in the middle. Look at that. Ah, beautiful. Like little pillows. This one's slightly puffier. This one's a little bit richer. And now for the tasting part. I'm gonna taste them plain and then I'm gonna put some butter on them. Why not add a little more butter, right? The shortcut. I mean, that sweet salt pepper thing is so good. They are fluffy, they are butter infused, nice and soft because of the steaming. This, sopping up your gravy, everyone will be so happy. And now for the showstopper. They're smaller because they're richer. But the flavor is so good. It's the potato flakes. You don't taste potato, they're just so good. I mean, these taste like Parker House rolls of my dreams, you know. They're a little bit sweeter because we add sugar to the dough. Just a little bit of sugar and it just makes it sweeter and also rounder, richer. You're still getting the pepperiness and that salty hit from the flake salt on top. But the best part about these, when you get a piece that has touched the edge and the Demerara sugar has kind of melted to it, and it's this melty, crunchy thing. With the pepper also, it's so good. It's so exciting. It's just like, ooh, all these things going on in your mouth. I love these. I love these. They are both amazing. This one, super easy. You don't have to, deal with yeast. You don't even have to make a dough. You just butter up your pizza dough, pop them in the oven, and they're incredible. The showstopper, a little more work, but oh my God, are they worth it? You can do it. You can make a yeast dough. If you've never done it, this is the perfect place to start. Even if you don't make these for Thanksgiving, I think you should make them the day after Thanksgiving because these will take leftovers just over the top. And now I'm going to put butter on these and I'm going to eat them all over again. I love you, shortcut. I love you, showstopper. You love each other. Ooh.